Today on Infinity Sports, we have Anthony Duckett, a Houston area sports writer, who's going to talk to us about the Houston Texans, their coaching search, Deshaun Watson, and several other things going on with the team. That coming up right after the intro. Welcome to Infinity Sports. I'm Wayne G. Sully could not make it today, but I have a great guest host with me today. He is a very talented writer. He covers the Houston Rockets for Fansided as well as Clutch City Control Room. He used to cover the Houston Texans for the Toro Times, and it is his second appearance on the show. That is Anthony Duckett. What's going on, Anthony?
Everything's good. How about you, man?
Not too bad. I mean, I'm not a Texans fan, so I guess it's going all right.
Well, in that case, it could be worse for you.
Before we get into that, I do want to say, please click the subscribe button. It's going to do a lot for the show, as well as put you first in line to catch the new content. If you prefer to listen to the show rather than watch it, we are available on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music. So listen to us while you drive to work, go for your daily walk, or whenever you listen to podcasts. We are an interactive show, so please feel free to follow us on Twitter at SportsInfinity5, on Instagram at Infinity Sports Podcast, and on Facebook at Sports Infinity or Infinity Sports Podcast. Anthony, so what is going on with the Texans? Apparently, they had the first head coaching vacancy when they fired Bill O'Brien, but they've got the last one to be filled. Now, is this more of a case of people not wanting to coach there, or is it the Texans doing their due diligence and taking their time?
Well, so I guess it depends on what you believe. My thoughts are that they initially botched the situation with Deshaun Watson. So now in the back, you're trying to appease him, smooth things over. So I personally think that complicates things. You don't know if he wants to be here or not. There's reports that the game today, Bills Chiefs game, the two finalists are Bieniemy and Leslie Frazier. So there are thoughts that after this game today that the Texans might move in the direction of whatever team loses because they'd be able to hire that guy first. Now, I don't really like that mindset. To me, the right guy all along is Bieniemy, and I'm kind of baffled that he hasn't gotten hired yet. I mean, there were I think 8 other jobs, maybe 7, 8 other jobs this cycle, and he didn't get any of them. So the Texans figured to be his only chance of getting a head coaching job this cycle. But again, if you're Bieniemy, do you even want to take the job if you don't know Deshaun's here, right? But then I also say if I'm Bieniemy, I don't even interview here unless I know, hey, Deshaun is, on board because, without Deshaun, where's the allure in this job, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great question. And when you look at the Houston Texans and their history of coaches, they've basically had 3 coaches since 2002, Dom Capers, Gary Kubiak, and Bill O'Brien. Between the 3 of them, Bill O'Brien has the best record, and he has 5 out of 7 of his seasons were winning seasons. So I'm curious if Bill O'Brien was fired as a head coach or if he was really just fired as a GM because of his poor moves.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that the franchise made the decision to not hire a GM and to allow him to fill that role. Now, Bill O'Brien, the coach, not as bad, right? 4 division titles. There's something to be said about that. The Texans were up 24 points just a year ago on the Chiefs, which is painful to even remember or talk about as a Texans fan. But the reality is, they were set up to win that game. So Bill O'Brien, the coach, not as bad. But the problem is that Bill O'Brien was going to be a package. You're going to have a GM and the coach, and him as a GM was awful. And what also is really, what gets forgotten about by a lot of my fellow Texans diehards and Deshaun diehards is that Deshaun Watson, after that Chiefs game, actually said, I want Bill O'Brien back. He's my coach. I don't have any doubt about that. He's my guy. And, unfortunately, an endorsement at that time for O'Brien man, he's going to be returning as, again, the package GM and coach, which honestly paved the way for DeAndre Hopkins trade.
Right. And I'm curious, too, you said Deshaun Watson saying that he wanted Bill O'Brien as his coach. Deshaun Watson reportedly came out and was very upset that he was not consulted when they hired a general manager, and the Texans went against the firm that they'd hired to find the general manager, and they went with Nick Caserio, who they wanted last year, and the Patriots refused to allow them to talk to him. I'm curious what your thought is on, him as a GM. I mean, I think that he'd be a very sought-after GM because of his success in New England.
So, that's a really great point. There's been a lot of upheaval, especially from the Deshaun camp, about Caserio's hire. And I understand the process that, there was a firm that was paid millions by, Texans owner Cal McNair, and the firm did not have this guy, Nick Caserio, on the list. So I understand it might seem to come out of left field, or Jack Easterby, having influence over Cal and swayed this GM hire. So the process of hiring, Nick Caserio was obviously a joke. But the fact is, the guy was a part of the Patriots for a long time, a part of several titles that the Patriots won. I mean, he was a coach on that staff. He was so coveted by the Patriots that, as you mentioned, they were trying to block the Texans from being able to pry him with a year left on his contract. So, I mean, the fact is, it seems like, from all we know, you really can't question the Patriots front office. I know they've had coaches that have left and didn't really do as well, but you really can't question the Patriots front office. And he was a part of that front office. Again, he was very valued by them, that they didn't want to let him go. So, to me, I'm kind of excited about what kind of moves he'll make. Now, the first move he's going to make is, the first two moves I'd say are probably the biggest when it comes to, the coach you hire and what you do with Deshaun. But, to me, the GM that they ended up choosing, I know the firm recommended that they hire a Steelers, I think, VP of player, some kind of role. I think it was Omar Khan, maybe is the person's name.
Louis Riddick, too, I think, was a finalist.
Yeah, that's right. I know Louis Riddick also interviewed. But to me, the GM that they end up hiring, Nick Caserio, the Texans have wanted him for a long time, and he's valued by a front office that, frankly, can't be questioned with New England.
Right. Now, my question for this, when it comes to the GM, we think of drafting, right? And you look at the Texans, they've just had bad luck looking at their coaching staff again since 2002, 18-46, 61-67, 56-56. They just can't seem to find any consistency at the top of the division. But I looked through their draft picks, their first-round draft picks, and David Carr, Andre Johnson, Jason Babin, Mario Williams, Brian Cushing, J.J. Watt, DeAndre Hopkins. They don't do a bad job drafting. So what is it that they can't take that leap to having consistency?
So they generally knock it out of the park in the first round, it seems like. But as we know, the draft is typically made in the later stages, third round, fourth round, fifth round, being able to find value, find gems late in the draft. And the Texans, that's, to me, where they've kind of lacked. They've more recently, they've done a little bit better. McKinney was a second round pick. Zach Cunningham, second round pick. Justin Reed, third round pick. More recently, they've done better in the later stages. But if you think back to 4 or 5 years ago, the Texans really late draft picks really weren't not that great. Braxton Miller, Jalen Strong. Guys that aren't with the team anymore. Alfred Blue is pretty good as a 6th round pick. Because you're not expecting to have great value there. But the draft is really made. Your first round picks have to be home runs, right? Those are going to be your guys that you expect the most from, right? But the draft is really made in the later stages. And in my opinion, that's really where the Texans have not really done as great when it comes to drafting.
And that makes, I think, Nick Caserio an even more impressive hire, because one of the things the Patriots do really well is find those gems in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. And he's been the head of scouting there for the last 5-6 years.
Right, exactly. That's also more, reason to me to be excited about it. He's got a great resume. He's coming from Patriots front office that has been, probably the best and the most structured and the most stabilized in the league. And whether or not, he was behind all these moves, I think Bill Belichick is, the final sign-off. The fact is, he has had influence, and that, cannot be overlooked at all.
Right. Now, I was looking at what problems they're going to have going into next year. They're $18 million over the cap heading into 2021, so they've got to do some cutting. And I was looking at who the cuts might be. J.J. Watt is due $17.5 million against the cap. He's got zero dead cap space or zero dead cap money. Brandon Cooks $12 million against the cap, zero dead again, and then David Johnson $9 million with only two dead. Obviously, the biggest cut seems at $17.5 million with no dead money. That J.J. Watt would be the most likely person to go. But he's been the face of the franchise. I mean, could they really part ways with him?
Yeah, that's the right move to make. And the Texans fan base, they want that too. I think at this point, everybody wants, J.J. Watt to be on a contender. I mean, he's on the back nine of his career. We don't know how much time he's got left. It's time for him to go to a contender where he has a legitimate chance of winning a ring. Because it would be, I mean, it would be, well, he wouldn't be the first. But it will be a travesty if he retires and he doesn't, had his last few years didn't have even a chance to compete for a ring, much less doesn't ever win one. Because he's been such a great player over the course of his time here. The Texans fan base, he's done so much for the city of Houston, as well. So the right move is to send him back into a team that I think that he wants to go to. Which will be a team that he believes gives him a shot at a ring. I don't think you're going to get Mac much for him, right? Because, again, he's on the back nine of his career. This past season, he didn't really play as great as he normally has before that. I think you're probably at best getting a third-round pick, which, again, if you're the Texans, it's not really about what you get back. It's more so about just doing right by a player who's been, absolutely spotless on and off the field, I would say, over the bulk of his time here.
Now, what do you think the chances are, again, odds 50-50 or whatever, that they release him, trade him, or restructure his contract just so it's a little bit lighter against the cap?
I mean, the latter, that makes sense. That makes sense. Again, if you're a team and you're inheriting this monsoon of a contract for what you're getting back, it will make perfect sense for him to restructure his deal or, for him to get released. He's got zero dead money as well. And it would be more appealing at that point. And he would be able to pick whatever team he wants to go to because he'd be a free agent. So that probably would be the best move for him and would make the most sense. But from an organizational standpoint, I would personally try and get what I can get back for him, depending on what that is.
Now, getting back to the coaching search, you mentioned Eric Bieniemy. And I'm surprised as well that he didn't end up with one of these jobs because – my understanding was he was the number one name on everybody's list. And then just 6 positions got filled up or whatever it was. And now the Texans are the last one. I think they did ask him, the last job as the Texans. Doesn't seem like anyone wants to go and coach there. And I think his response was, I just want to be a head coach in the NFL. So it seems like he would be open to going to Houston.
Yeah. Again, my thoughts personally are that he would want to be here if he's got Deshaun here. But it's been said that he's a bad interviewer, which I guess would make sense because, year after year after year, we still are shocked that he hasn't gotten hired yet. And he gets interviews every year. I mean, this year he had a lot of interviews and he didn't get any of them. So it's been said that he's a bad interviewer. I know there are also folks who have questioned, what exactly does he do with the Chiefs offense? Is Andy Reid the driving force behind the offense? What's his role? I mean, to me, either way it goes, that kind of goes out the window. I mean, we see less qualified guys get head coaching jobs as well. So, and not to mention the fact that the Chiefs tree alone, they've had, OCs, Doug Peterson, Matt Nagy, guys before Bieniemy get hired. And again, if the thoughts are that, well, Andy Reid runs the offense, not those guys, well, why did those guys end up getting head coaching jobs as well? As opposed to Bieniemy. So if he's a bad interviewer, then I guess that explains it. But as far as his interest in the job, it does seem like he's interested still. Like I said, the Texans are last opening, and he's still involved. I read from Adam Schefter this morning that he's going to be brought back for a second interview. So you have to think that if he's agreeing to do another round of interviews, he's very much interested in the job at this point.
Now, some of the other names, I know obviously Josh McDaniels was put out there way back when they hired Caserio because of the connection. And McDaniels also interviewed for the Eagles job. Yeah. And then they also mentioned, this was the one that puzzled me, Josh McCown. And they actually liked the idea of bringing in Josh McCown as the head coach and having a couple of coordinators who were head coaches previously, which is why they also interviewed Jim Caldwell. But I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, that's one of those things that that kind of puzzles me also. I mean, I read the different takes where that, maybe the Texans are trying to help, set the way for him to become a head coach next year or get some interviews next year. Or that maybe they liked him so much they wanted to interview him so that he could be a part of whatever staff or whoever coach is brought in, maybe as a quarterback coach role or, a passing game coordinator role, some type of capacity on the next coaching staff. Maybe they're trying to groom him up, give him an interview to see how he do. I don't think that the Texans are really ever seriously considered hiring him as a head coach. But I think they probably want to give him the experience of going through the interview process and give him a chance on the next staff or whoever is hired, which I think is kind of dicey because you figure the next guy wants to bring in his own guys. But that to me is probably what the interview with him was more about.
And I was thinking, too, that the interview with McDaniels and even with Bieniemy is more about appeasing Deshaun Watson. Because the reality is, if you look at the team, Bill O'Brien's an offensive head coach. Their offense has been the same over the last 5 years. They haven't lost any points per game over the last 5 years. In fact, last year, Deshaun Watson had the most passing yards he's ever had, the best completion percentage he's ever had, the most touchdowns, and the fewest interceptions. Yeah. And yet they're interviewing offensive guys instead of defensive guys when their defense gives up more points year after year after year.
Well, that's true. I mean, the exception of Leslie Frazier, he's obviously defensive coordinator, Buffalo, and then they interviewed Matt Eberflus, defense coordinator for the Chiefs. Colts. I'm sorry, but yeah, I mean, it seems like they want to appease Deshaun, and from that perspective of appeasing him with your head coaching hire, that makes sense, right? He's going to be interacting with this guy on a regular day to day. And he's obviously your franchise player, also the face of your franchise, also the future of your franchise, right? So I understand wanting to hire someone that that he signs off on and someone that he feels will make him better. Because we've seen this season Deshaun didn't have the weapons. The Texans had decent receivers. You had guys in and out, suspension, injuries, things like that. But he did not have the caliber of a DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, and he went out and led the league in passing yards. So. It makes sense that you maybe want to get a guy who he feels and the franchise front office feels can propel him and take him, further. So when it comes to that, I do understand that. I think it's going to be kind of tough to give him what he wants. First of all, we don't really know what he wants. He hasn't said anything except he posts these, cryptic lyrics every day for us to kind of break down and dissect. What does this mean? But from what we have heard is that he, wanted them to hire Bieniemy. He was upset that they took so long to interview him, is what we've heard. But he also wants the Texans to keep the most recent offensive coordinator, Tim Kelly, in some kind of capacity. And again, that's going to be kind of tough because, especially Bieniemy, if they hire an offensive-minded guy, why would he want to keep the old offensive coordinator? He runs his own offense. He's going to want his own guys or to run his offense himself. So I think it's going to be kind of tough for Tim Kelly to be or any of the current holdovers to be retained on Bieniemy's staff. But that's what Deshaun said he wanted. So I guess it's part of appeasing him.
And I guess some of my frustration with the Deshaun Watson, what he wants, quote unquote, is, he wants to be involved in the general manager hire. He wants to be involved in the coaching hire. And now he's saying, I want to, supposedly his preferred destination is the New York Jets and then the Miami Dolphins. And I'm like, dude, you just signed a 4 or 5 year huge extension. Yeah. You really shouldn't be just like we talked about James Harden last time you were on. You really aren't in any position to have any leverage.
Right. Well, and the thing is, and so this is my thoughts about it. And it's an unpopular take. A lot of my fellow Texans, brethren, fans don't like this. But, to me, players, the Texans were foolish to ever approach him and say, hey, reportedly the owner said, hey, I want to meet with Deshaun. We're going to hire a GM. I want you to give us some guidance, some insight. What are your thoughts on that process? Players don't have a say in GM hires, right? Coach, okay, I get that. But GMs, that should be decided by your ownership group or by an EVP or by some type of collective front office, group or assembly. You never should ask a player, especially Deshaun's. As great as he is, he's still early in his career. Why would you be asking him to help you with a GM hire? Maybe if you're talking about a Tom Brady, 20 years in the league, even then I think you still wouldn't make sense. But that would make more sense. A player who's been in the league 20 years or 15, 16 years, who maybe has bumped elbows with GMs, or whatever the case. But the fact that you asked Deshaun to help give you insight into your GM hire, now you set the stage for him to have power that he shouldn't have or feel entitled to, right? You pick a guy, you ask him to give you, and the thing is, so you asked Deshaun to give you a list of GMs. Okay, you take a look at that list and it said, this list, we could do better. And they decided against the guys that he had on his list. But the reports are that he was upset that they didn't even interview none of the guys. He didn't expect them to hire none of his guys. He thought, if you guys value my opinion, you should at least talk to these guys. And I guess on one hand, I understand that. On the other hand, it's like, do you really want to waste these guys' time? If they're close to Deshaun and you know they're not going to hire these guys, then would he not be upset or frustrated also if you interview his guys, waste their time and don't hire them, right? So, what he wants, we'll see. I really don't know. The whole Jets thing doesn't make sense to me because, whatever team ends up trading for Deshaun, they're going to be, I think, in a worse spot than the Texans from a draft pick standpoint because you're going to have to give up pretty much all of your highly valued or good draft picks for the next couple years or so, which will leave you in a worse spot than the Texans are in now. But the Jets, on top of that, have so many holes. It's like, yeah, you can get Deshaun, and I've read people say, well, if you get Deshaun, then maybe, they might be able to sign Allen Robinson because Deshaun's there, and maybe so. Maybe that's the case with the Jets. But even then, if you have Deshaun and Allen Robinson, that's a great, start. But they have a lot more holes. So are you really going to be better off in New York than you are now, right? I read that he likes Robert Saleh. Maybe that's what it is. But I think that will be going backwards from him.
Yeah, to me, the best play for all parties involved seems to be the Miami Dolphins because you can get Tua back and the number 3 pick and the number 16 pick. That's a pretty good haul and potentially even a pick next year. And then Miami also still has all of their picks this year, other than those first 2 rounders. So that it's still actually wins for all of them.
Yeah, that I'm of the camp that you don't trade him. You don't have to. But if he forces his hand and says, I want out, and he has a no trade clause, which also complicates things. He had to sign off on the trade before he gets dealt. Miami would seem like a pretty good package. I don't know how I feel about Tua, but I like those draft picks, that they have. The Texans could get their own draft pick back. Remember they sent that pick to the Dolphins for Kenny Stills and Laremy Tunsil. So you would get your own pick back, which this year that pick would be pretty valuable because you went 4-12. So yeah, that seems like a pretty good overall package if you have to move him. Yeah.
My question, I guess, would be, let's say he stays. They hire a coach, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot for a year. We'll see how it goes. Deshaun Watson comes back. You get a good coach, like, let's say, Eric Bieniemy comes in as the head coach. You've got Caserio now, who's a really great, draft presence. What is it that the Texans need? They were 4-12 this year. If Deshaun stays, what do they need to go 10-6?
Well, they've got to get better for sure in the defense. As you mentioned, defense was awful. They need some more help on pass rushers. You can draft pass rusher, later in the draft, impact player. You can also look at free agency. I haven't looked at the list of who the top, free agents are, pass rushers. Secondary is not that bad. Bradley Roby, played really well for the Texans. They also believe in Lonnie Johnson, Justin Reed as well. They believe in those guys. O-line has actually been better, right, with Tunsil and with, Tyvis Howard, some of those guys. Now, the center's not that great, Nick Martin, but he's under contract long-term, so, I guess you deal with it. You definitely need some more receivers, for sure. Cooks played well, especially towards the end of the season. Will Fuller played great, although he's in the contract year. How much, we always see guys play great when they're in the contract year. He also ended up getting suspended because of, PDs. But Deshaun said he wants Will Fuller back. To me, what you really need to focus on is getting, better at the wide receiver position. You got to sign a positive as a running back free agent so you can get a good running back. They definitely need a better run game. It'll help Deshaun. Obviously, we've seen that in the past. But yeah, to me, you need to get some more pass catchers. You need better pass rushers, and you've got to get a better presence at running back.
Okay, that makes sense. And I was thinking running back's really the one position I would think you can get a 5th or 6th round running back who turns into a stud.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can. You should be able to at least.
Now, that's kind of what I had on the Texans. I did actually have a Rockets question for you because last time we talked to you, Harden wanted out. That's what we knew, right?
Yep.
I think the Houston Rockets hit the lottery moving him and getting back Victor Oladipo and essentially 8 first-round draft picks when you figure 4 swaps and 4 firsts.
Yeah, I mean that was a pretty good haul. That was the first tough test for Raphael Stone, the new GM. He's actually made some really good moves this offseason. Christian Wood signing, picking up players like Jayshawn Tate, Sterling Brown, guys who were kind of unheralded. But yeah, I mean that was a really good haul. A lot of people I also personally felt that Ben Simmons would have been, a centerpiece of a deal, but the Rockets didn't really covet him, and that makes perfect sense if they're looking for future flexibility. I mean, the thing about Oladipo is it's an expiring deal, so a lot of flexibility there. You can do a sign and trade at the end of the season. Maybe you like the way he plays throughout the season and give him an extension. You got a lot of different options, but the 4 first-round draft picks from Brooklyn and then the 4 swaps, that's obviously a haul. But I was doing some research yesterday, and I didn't realize Harden, Irving, and Durant can all leave Brooklyn after next season because of player option, right? And that would be realistic. That would have given them 2 seasons, this season and next, to give it a shot and see, exactly, what's going to happen. Is it going to work out or not? If that happens, which I don't know if it will, but if that happens, then now the Rockets own the future of the Brooklyn Nets, who we would figure would probably not be good, definitely not as good, which would be good picks for sure, right? So yeah, that was a good haul. I hate the way Harden left. But overall, the haul that you got back for him was probably better than you could have thought, especially considering that we knew that he wanted out. I always think in trade talks, whenever it's leaked that a player wants out and the team has to move him, you're going to get less back because you don't have as much leverage. But for that haul, they did really good.
Now, I'm going to get your conspiracy theory take on this. Is he wearing a fat suit during warm-ups? Because he looks skinnier when he plays.
It seems like I know the photo that went viral of him. He had on like padding underneath his jersey, and that might make him look bulkier. But my dad actually pointed out, if you look at his arms, they actually look pretty big, pretty flabby, even with that fat suit on. So I don't know, but it's really weird. I mean, he has like a husky build, barrel chested build, because we've seen photos where he's looks like he's in shape, like he's really slimmed down. In the same day, he'll take a photo where he looks like he's an old man at the YMCA playing,
Well, an old man that can still drop 37, 12, and 12.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting though. They're using him as a point guard over there. I noticed his scoring has been down the last couple of days, or last couple of games at least. Assist numbers are up. To me, it's going to take a while for them to learn how to play together. A lot of people feel like Harden and Kyrie are really kind of similar players, kind of cancel each other out. The key thing here is that Durant is obviously an unselfish player. He doesn't need as many shots to get his 30 or 40 or whatever. So that's good. I mean, I don't think that they have enough to get past the Lakers still, not this season. They give up a lot of their pieces that they would need. LeVert, Allen, guys that would come up, off the bench, or the guys that in the playoffs, could be a positive, make a big impact. Again, that's the price to pay. You're getting James Harden. They would do that anyways. But I'd be curious to see if they have enough to get past the Lakers.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I know that's the dream final. I think everyone wants is Brooklyn, LA.
Yeah.
And Brooklyn may not even get to the finals. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, they played Milwaukee the other day. That was a good game. And they beat the Bucks. So maybe they feel confident, but they also got beat by the Cavaliers back-to-back games. I watched Colin Sexton drop 42. I mean, did you see that game by chance? The Cleveland versus Okay. So in that game, I mean, every time the Cavs needed a bucket, it was going to Colin Sexton, and they tried the Nets tried switching Durant on him, Kyrie on him. I mean, he's just dropping threes every single time he got the ball and they needed a bucket. Boom, 3-pointer. Boom, 3-pointer. And it was like, again, he dropped 42 points. And they lost. Like I said, the Nets lost to the Cavs in both games twice. So. We'll see. I mean, it's gonna take time. Of course, it takes time. New players, star players to adapt to one another's game, adjust. But I mean, we'll see.
All right. Well, again, I appreciate having you come on. This has been Anthony Duckett. Please check out his writing on Fansided for the Rockets as well as Clutch City Control Room. Fantastic pieces. Every time I read one, I'm always like, yes, I agree 100%. Not always with the title.
That.
Sometimes he sucked me in with the title, and I'm like, all right, good. I'm glad he doesn't believe that.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you for the support and for me being on the show again as well. I always love it.
No, not a problem. All right, so that ends our show. I'm going to throw it to Kenny. Kenny, what time is it?